Smart Studios, it is Dr. Scott Hambleton and Dr. Randy Easterling in the house. We're talking about 6565A, where we all know this and how we do this, and we got to count on the folks out there that agree with us that this is bad. And the only strategy that we can put together, and it is the best strategy for this, and I think it placates, Dr. Hambleton, those people who feel like if you are terminal and you want to use marijuana, fine, but at least it's legislated to a point where it's safe for the rest of the population. Then what you've got to do is vote no on this thing, where it says, do you want marijuana, medical marijuana in the state of Mississippi? You vote no. I don't. And I think that's got to be 51% of the people who have to vote. If they vote yes, then we've got it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you got to vote no on Initiative 65 and yes on Initiative 65A. That's crucial.
The second part. That's very, very crucial. Because what it does, and you've got to explain this to the other people in your household who are of like mind and care about your kids and your grandkids, you've got to tell them you vote no on the first one, then you vote yes on 65A. It is not a trick. We're not doing the Uncle Remus on you at any point here. We're just telling you that it looks like 70-something% of the people in the state think that they want marijuana, and they may vote for 65. Oh, they may vote yes, we do want it. But if we do get it, then your wishes are still taken care of, and we will have medical marijuana, but we will have it with some coordination.
Well, let me make it clear. Physicians in Mississippi, at least those of us that are members of the State Medical Association, and physicians nationwide are not opposed to investigate medicinal marijuana. There's the AMA has said for decades, take it off Schedule 1, let's research it, and let's see if there's any efficacy. The State Medical Association has said the same. The egregious thing about this is what you mentioned earlier. It takes it out of the hands of the legislature. So if this thing passes and it goes off the rails, which I suspect it will, I can't pick up the phone and call Briggs Hobson, my state senator, and complain because he can't do anything about it.
No.
So it bypasses representative government, and it puts into the Constitution a drug that has not been studied in humans in the United States, has not been approved, is in a Schedule 1 in the same category as heroin and some of the other LSD and so forth. Mm-hmm. And so what we want to do is have the federal government move it out of Schedule 1 and let's do some human studies on it.
There will still be pot shops if it's 65A. But there will be some regulations on there where they can locate and where they cannot locate, is my understanding.
Yes, sir. The state of Oklahoma has a population of roughly 650,000 people. Mm-hmm. I'm surprised it was that low. In the first year that they passed something similar to this, but they passed it in statute, they had over 2,000 pot shops. These are not treatment centers. These are cartels that are selling marijuana. Mississippi has a population of 4.2 times more than Oklahoma, so what would make us think for 1 minute that we're not going to wake up a year from now and there'd be 4,000 pot shops with very little regulation, very loose zoning, no taxing, only fees that go to support the industry, and that we're going to end up with 4,000 or 5,000 of those all over the state.
If those problems ensue as they have in other states, and I was reading something on Friday, and people are not mentioning this, but traffic accidents have increased dramatically, some 30 to 40% in some of these places that have recreational marijuana and medical marijuana. Traffic accidents and fatalities have increased. Crimes have increased in many areas, and certainly in the areas in and around some of these pot shops. So if that happens, your law enforcement's going to have more people. They're going to have an increased budget. You're going to pay for that, and it's not going to come out of the marijuana teal because none of that money can be used for anything bad that happens because we have medical marijuana. Is that right?
That is correct. It's a incredible situation. The market will probably be flooded with this high-potency marijuana. It will have an impact on opioid use and overdose deaths. We know that as well. So it's alarming.
Tell me some of the things that you see on a daily basis with this, though. Or is the population or the patients getting younger on this?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's no question, but that people using cannabis are down into the 9, 10, 11-year-olds because it's so prevalent. 40% of people that abuse opioids get the opioids from family members. Mm-hmm. Okay, what would make someone think for any reason that if you had cannabis tablets or a tincture or an ointment or the smokable around your house, and you had a child or grandchild or a teenager, that they're not going to know exactly where that is and avail themselves of it? It's ridiculous to think otherwise.
The the rules and regulations of most of this, as far as what the state will do, is they have to wait till after it passes to find out, and then they'll meet in the next session, 2021, to put the guidelines together. It would have to be done, and they'd have to put an objective or the rules and regulations as far as what it can be used for. But as far as you know, will it mirror 65?
You talking about 65A?
The illnesses? No, will 65A mirror 65 as far as the where they can use it and cannot use it?
No, I think 65A is going to give the legislature some wiggle room to set up zoning. Perhaps
I'm talking about the type of illnesses, the reasons that you can get it.
Yeah. I don't think they'll use the same illnesses. I think it'll be like I read to you. Initiative 65A says it has to be for sound medical reasons, and so hopefully the legislature, the leadership would get a group of healthcare professionals together that have experience with this and get their advice and come up with a bill that's that's palatable.
But the doctors cannot write a prescription. They have to write what is called, Dr. Hambleton, a certification.
That's correct.
It says here, and this is some of the information being put out by Republicans for Initiative 65, which is coming out of this organization paid for by Mississippians for Compassionate Care, which has gotten literally millions of dollars. I mean, they millions and millions of dollars. But it says here, when it comes to the comparison sheet, it says as far as certification for patients, Initiative 65, medical doctors required, but for Alternative 65, health professionals. So it makes it sound like health professionals, you could have a nurse practitioner do it.
And 65A, it appears that would be the case. Not in 65. 65, it says physician specifically.
Yeah.
So
why would 65A let a nurse practitioner?
I don't know, and I'm not sure that's set in stone. I think those are parameters.
Well, how can that be set in stone when nothing else is set? Here's what I don't understand. On the rest of the stuff, it's to be announced. Mm-hmm. But on the things that try to make it a point for them, mm-hmm. It's counter to logic here. Why would you have the state legislature want a nurse practitioner to be able to write a script for that or a certification?
Well, I can't speak for the legislature, but I'm assuming since it says healthcare professional, if the legislature came up with a statute, they could narrow that down and say specific healthcare professionals.
Will the medical association agree to that?
I can't speak for the medical association on that. One thing I do know, mm-hmm. And I want people to think about this, Dr. Hambleton and I are licensed physicians in the state of Mississippi. By law, when I write a prescription, I have to list the medication, I have to list the strength, I have to list how many pills, such as lisinopril 20 milligrams, number 30. I have to put on the prescription, take it once a day or twice a day. I have to sign my name, and that goes to a pharmacist whose practice is regulated by a pharmacy board, and he or she dispenses that medication. What we're doing by this is allowing non-healthcare professionals to dispense, and any physician that has a license that's unrestricted. It can be an 80-year-old retired radiologist that wants to write this or write the certification can do so. It doesn't have a strength. It doesn't have a dosage. It doesn't have how often you have to take it. And it's just beyond comprehension. It runs afoul to everything that we've been taught in medical school.
Would a physical therapist be able to do this, or a chiropractor?
No, well, not in 65, and I'm pretty sure they wouldn't in 65A. No, they don't have prescriptive authority, respiratory therapists and physical therapists. Now, in 65, if it goes into the Constitution, I don't think they could be granted that, but who knows what 65 is going to do. Like I said, it's going to be a dumpster fire.
Well, who is, go back to the malpractice insurance, where does that figure in here? If you do offer or write a certification for this, you have no idea what the potency of that is. You're not telling them what brand to get. Go get Uncle Molly's or whatever the hell it is. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's wide open. How do you protect yourself as a doctor?
I don't know that there's any way you could do that.
You're basically telling them here, and the pill is 5 shelves long back there. You're saying here, just go get a pill.
Sure. Yeah. If I write a prescription for an antibiotic such as Cipro, if I don't put 250 milligrams or 500 milligrams or however many milligrams, I don't put the strength on there, the pharmacist won't fill it.
You don't know what else they're taking at that particular time.
Exactly.
Wide open. We'll talk more coming up next. I used this analogy before, and I think it's a pretty good analogy, too. If we had let the casinos, under the compassionate care for gaming, do what this is through an initiative, we wouldn't have the casinos on the coast, on the river in Tunica. We wouldn't have any of that. We'd have a slot machine, every barbershop, every restaurant, and that's it. No tens of millions of people coming to our state to visit. We just have slot machines.
And the mafia would be running it.
And very real, the legal mafia dealers out there would be in control of them. Mm-hmm. And people need to understand that. The legislature, in times of gaming, sports betting, lottery, have done it the right way. And they can do this the right way, but you've got to vote no on. Number one, do you want marijuana in the state? And number two, vote 65A in case enough people do vote for it.
Yeah, and I like the way you phrase that. We need to stop saying medical marijuana. There's no such thing as medical marijuana. It's marijuana. And as Dr. Hambleton mentioned earlier, the concentration of THC now that we're seeing on the street is 300 times what it was when I was a teenager some years ago. And 300 times more, and then you're not putting any regulations on it, basically. And again, you're allowing any physician that has an unrestricted license, and we have a lot of physicians who are retired that maintain their license to write a certification for this.
Dr. Hambleton, I've heard stories of people getting the edibles because they're cute little Snuggie bears or gummy worms and things such as that. But they react a little bit differently than the joints themselves, don't they?
Yes, they do. The onset of action is much slower.
So it creeps up on you?
It can take maybe an hour for maximum effect, possibly longer.
When they tell you to eat only a quarter of the cookie, you should eat only a quarter of the cookie.
That's correct. And there's two problems with that. Mm-hmm. One is unintentional use by children. And if they look at it like a cookie, they might eat 2 or 3. And there's no telling.
Have you seen that happen?
I've heard of it happening. Yeah. I haven't treated patients in the setting, but that's one problem. Another problem is for the people who intentionally use the edibles, they're going to not feel an effect and take another dose and another dose.
Yeah.
They may not have a fatal overdose from that, but they may very well have an acute or a psychotic episode.
The whole wording in the 65 by these people who call themselves compassionate care, but at the end of the day, they're the ones going to be making the money. Sure. They're the ones, and it's millions upon millions of dollars. 99% of the people in the state are not going to make money from this. They're going to lose money or lose family.
And these are outside business concerns.
A lot of them are, but some of them are within our own state legislature.
A few are local people that invested, but the money basically goes out of the state and goes into some banking concerns outside of Mississippi.
Well, one of the reasons I think is it is hideous the way they've done this. They constantly put out in their promotional stuff, We want to set up these treatment centers. Treatment centers are just a place to buy marijuana, and it has nothing to do with treatment. Mm-hmm. What does it treat? Do they treat anything? They don't treat anything at a treatment center. They just sell you marijuana.
I was a medical director of a treatment center for 30 years in Vicksburg, and when you came to our center, you saw registered nurses, LPNs, physicians, mm-hmm. psychiatrists. We had psychologists as consultants. Those are treatment centers. This is simply a pass-through for what would then be legal marijuana. There's no treatment modality involved in this whatsoever. They just dispense whatever you want to buy. And that goes back to 2.5 ounces every 14 days or 5 ounces a month. We're talking about an average of about 10 marijuana joints a day. Now, who in their right mind is going to hire someone to be their receptionist or to work in their company, to work here, to work in a hospital, to work in an insurance agency, whatever. Yeah. If they tell you up front, by the way, I'm smoking 10 joints a day, this would allow them to do this, and I'm not so sure you could not hire someone based on that, because it all of a sudden becomes a legal medication.
There are so many unwritten rules on here that we do not know. Number one, if a state employee shows up with this one, are they protected or not? Will they go on leave? Will they get unemployment? What happens? There are going to be lawsuits out the wazoo. Yeah. Lawyers are going to make some money on this one for sure. The other part of this is there are some laws as far as federal, and we talked about the gun control thing, or if you own a gun. Or if you want to go buy a gun and you got a medical marijuana card, they ask you that, I think.
Well, there's some federal legislation that says that you cannot possess a gun if you're a user. Mm-hmm. I was struck this morning when I left Bovina, about 4 or 5 miles down the interstate. There's a new Love's truck stop. There must have been 50 to 75 18-wheelers parked there. It was just unbelievable. Every one of those drivers is regulated by the Department of Transportation, and if they get a drug test and it's positive for marijuana, it makes no difference whether you have a certificate or not. You just lost your job. I was a fitness for duty officer for Grand Gulf Nuclear Power Plant for 30 years, and that is regulated by the Nuclear Regulatory Agency. If you set foot on that plant and you get drug tested, you're positive for cannabis, your history.
Where do we grow this stuff?
Well, the place has been grown more than anywhere in the United States.
In 65A, if it passes, is it mandated we grow it here?
Oh, no.
We can
I don't know. I don't know about 65A. 65, no, it's not mandated.
65, I'm talking about 65A. Yeah. 65, we don't know where we grow it. We don't have to grow it here.
It's my understanding there's nothing that says it has to be grown in Mississippi.
We can take it anywhere in the U.S. I'm sure. I guess we could import it from Mexico if it's legal.
I can't answer that. That's all part of the big dumpster fire we're fixing to see. You know, trying to figure this out after we've done it. It's kind of like, let's read the bill so we know what's in it let's pass it so we can know what's in it.
If the money goes to the Department of Health and they can't spend it on anything but implementing the program, what does implementing the program mean?
Good question.
I mean,
well,
the Joel Baumgarbs of the world are going to be contracting with people to bring the pot shops in on the corners.
Well, I have a very good.
What do we need to do as far as the state agency? Where's that money going to go?
Well, I have a very good friend who's an attorney in Florida, and she actually practiced in Mississippi for 10 years, and she went back to Florida, and she worked for the health department of Florida. And she, for a short period of time, ran their, quote, medical marijuana program, and they had a whole agency set up. And so to think that this is going to be a small operation and the fees come from that are going to pay for this operation, and it's not going to impede the everyday function of the health department. And, you know, think what you want to about COVID. I mean, think what you want to about masks and social distancing. At the end of the day, the Mississippi State Department of Health under Thomas Dobbs has done a yeoman's job, and they're working literally 24/7. And the idea that we're going to put something in their wheelhouse that diverts them from working on a daily basis on this pandemic is just beyond my comprehension.
This is the 1st of October. I mean, if we pass this in November, they got to start implementing it. There's a timeline on here from where it's going to be grown, who can bring it in, how much can be brought in, where the money goes, what's legally, can they cash? Is it cash? Who holds it? Can you put it in a bank? There are so many unanswered questions. How are you going to have time to worry about COVID?
It's cash on the barrelhead, as I understand it, because no insurance covers it. I don't know that you can use credit cards. I don't think you can. Then when you get the cash, that was a problem that's been in Colorado and other states, is you get these piles of cash that you can't put in the bank. I think it's incumbent upon mayors and aldermen and supervisors to hear the message that if you own a liquor store in Vicksburg or a clothing store, or if you own an appliance store, when someone goes in and buys your product, there's a sales tax attached to that, and a certain percentage of that sales tax is rebated back to the city and the county. So if that liquor store is robbed or catches on fire, for example, or the appliance store, then the fire department, the police department show up and they do what they do, and they're paid for partially by taxes. If this thing passes, these pot shops are going to pay absolutely no taxes whatsoever. The 7% fee will go to the health department. Now, having said that, Paul, if all your collections are cash, what makes you think that everything that's bought is going to end up in the coffers? The 7% is going to end up in the coffers of the health department. We already know if you go to a restaurant and pay cash, that about 40% of that never shows up with the IRS. It just goes in someone's pocket.
Medical marijuana shall only be dispensed to a qualified patient or caregiver with a current medical marijuana identification card by a medical marijuana treatment center. Folks, I don't think I've ever seen, as long as I've been on the air, something that is explosive. You're talking about, what did you call it? You didn't call it a cluster, but you called it something else.
Dumpster fire.
A dumpster fire. That's the nice term. Final segment's coming up next. What a quandary. Molly says on C-Spire text line 601-879-4395. Work for a construction company. Our policy includes random drug testing, and even if marijuana is legalized, a positive test means termination. Then the patient says, go get some lawyer, and says, wait a minute, I have a legal certification for this. I have the ailment, and you're going to fire me. And here we go to court.
Well, that again is part of the dumpster fire, and I guess there's a lot of lawyers out there licking their chops wanting 65 to pass, because your point's well taken. My employer cannot come and dismiss me from employment because I'm taking penicillin or because I'm taking Lipitor. So if you're taking a drug that has been put in the Constitution and is now legal, unless you're impaired, impairment's a different story. I'm not so sure that the company can say, unless it's regulated by the federal government, I'm not so sure that the company can say, we're dismissing you. That would be an interesting lawsuit.
But then, to take that and play devil's advocate, if something happens and he's making widgets and he gets hurt on the job or hurt somebody else, then the lawsuit is against the company because they allowed the guy to go through whatever he or she's doing impaired.
Exactly.
It's nonstop.
Yeah. I mean,
one way or the other, their insurance is going to go up.
And I said this when we were off the air. I am quite offended, and I think Dr. Hambleton would agree with this, that this thing of Mississippians for Compassionate Care or Physician for Compassionate Care, that if you don't agree with, quote, marijuana as a medicine, that you're not for compassionate care. I don't know of a single physician or nurse or pharmacist or whatever that's wouldn't go out of their way to help their patients. That's what we do. And to imply that we have to buy into or sign off on legalizing a drug that the federal government says is illegal and has no medicinal purposes is just egregious.
Well, Dr. Hambleton, one of the things that worries me, and I see this picture in some of the publicity, this worries me more than anything else. Looking at this, of these gummy bears, we look at the Pop-Tarts. There's something that looks like Pop-Tarts, but it's Pop-Tart. It's candy that mimics the Pop-Tarts. They're these suckers and everything else. This is a generational change that lets a kid grow up with this in the house, knowing that this is something that mom and dad took for medicine.
That's correct. And it is extremely worrisome that this product's going to be available to children, frankly. It will be in many homes lying around. It represents incredibly effective marketing. We saw the same thing 25, 30 years ago using opioids for chronic pain. It's taken us this long to get out of that mess, and we've seen it over and over throughout the years. So
I tell you, an interesting study would be, I've got a 3-year-old granddaughter that lives 5 miles from here. Put a brownie on the counter and do the old candid camera thing and put a 3-year-old in the room and see what percentage of 3-year-olds are going to pick that brownie up and eat it and how long it takes them to do it. It'll be under 5 seconds, and it'll be about 90%.
Not only grandkids, some grandpas would take that brownie, too. So. Yeah. Let me ask you this, one more final question here. Do we have drug testing for drivers, like a DUI, that you know of, as far as marijuana is concerned? If someone is physically impaired, highway patrol or officer stops, can we find out if there's no meter right now?
There's not like a point of impact or point of contact test. Now they can get a urine sample from you, but they wouldn't do that on the side of the road, obviously. And they could conceivably get a blood test.
Field sobriety test, basically.
No, there's not a field sobriety test that I'm aware of.
Just the
cannabis.
similar ones that they do for any alcohol, for any suspected impairment. But they will be, I don't think that they will escape prosecution.
Yeah.
Even with 65.
Final thoughts from the good Dr. Scott Hambleton.
I hope that everyone pays attention to this. I really appreciate you in your attempts to bring this to the forefront. I hope that everyone does vote no 65 and yes for 65A.
So on the first one, vote no. We do not want medical marijuana, so-called medical marijuana in the state of Mississippi. But if it does pass, then at least there's a backup to protect us, having the legislature decide, and they must decide how we will have it in the state. It's not an option. You'll have to do it, but it has to be done with the citizens in mind. Final thoughts from Dr. Randy Easterling.
Well, I would just echo what Dr. Hambleton said. This is we're on the precipice of making some decisions that are not going to be easy, if at all possible, to unwind. And I'm for democracy. I'm for representative government. And if the legislature passes a bill that I don't like or I'm uncomfortable with or has unattended consequences, which they almost always do, I want to be able to call my legislator and complain. And if you pass this thing 65, it takes everything out of the hands of the legislature.
Think there's any harm between having medical marijuana and hydroxychloroquine together?
I knew that you could not go 45 minutes without bringing that up.
I got a story in here where you got more deaths on Tylenol than hydroxychloroquine. Did you see that story?
No, I didn't see that.
That's a story.
That might be fake news.
No, it's a good Dr. Simone Gold. She says there are more deaths on Tylenol than hydroxychloroquine.
Is she the one from? Well, never mind. I should have told you he was going to do this. He can't help himself.
Good to have you guys. Appreciate it very much. I think it's very informed, and we will continue this conversation.
Have a good and safe week.
Same to you. Back with more coming up next.